Hey everybody, it's Adam Farkas along with
Paul Farkas here.
Now, today we have a rather unique show for you. For those of you who signed up for the show, as you know, we had a guest speaker who was going to actually give this talk today, but unfortunately something came up and she couldn't be here. So Paul and I are filling in.
Yeah, Adam called me. Adam, you remember the name Satchel Paige?
Yes, I do remember Satchel Paige.
Yeah. For those of you who are too young to remember, Satchel Paige was the oldest pinch. He was a pitcher.
Yes.
He was a relief pitcher. He was the oldest rookie, and he ended up being the oldest reliever. And I feel like Satchel Paige tonight.
This is probably a good analogy, but tonight what we're here to talk about is the multifocal practice opportunity. It's the second in a series of webinars that we're doing. All about multifocal contact lenses in practice. And, Paul, you said you're a rookie, but I can't think of a better person to actually talk to us about this tonight, because when you started practice, you were actually there before there were soft lenses.
I could be a historian.
There you go. So you've actually seen the evolution of the lenses from the beginning.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about the evolution and the technology, and talk about mostly about the economics of working these things into your practice.
Right.
Now, the ground rules before we start: on the right side of your screen, you'll see a box that says questions. If you have any questions during the webinar tonight, feel free to just type them into that box. And then at the end, we want to do kind of an interactive thing where Paul and I will read those questions and then talk to each other and try to answer them as best we can.
Hopefully there'll be some questions.
Yes, so audience participation is always recommended. So please go ahead. Again, if you have any questions, use the question box, put it right in there, and away we will go. So why don't we get started here, Paul? So we'll try to pretend that we're experts here, right?
Yeah, you got it.
Here we go. So the multifocal practice opportunity. Let's see if I can get the keyboard going here. There we go. So some disclosures. The program tonight was brought to us by Alcon, and they are actually responsible for the slides that you're looking at right now. Right. Certainly, I don't do a job that's as professional as this, so you can sort of tell that it was theirs. And so everything here is going to be on label. And if you have any questions about anything that we're doing here, feel free to contact the folks at Alcon.
Yeah, and they are advertisers.
Yes, they are. Absolutely, they are advertisers on our site. So let's talk a little bit about multifocal lenses. So up on your screen right now, you're going to see that there's a growing opportunity for practices. There are going to be 126 million emerging and established presbyopes in the US by 2020. So that's by next year. Now, if you do the math, that means that there's an estimated 1,800 potential presbyopic patients and 900 potential emerging presbyopic patients, so 2,700 potential multifocal contact lens candidates for each US optometrist by 2020.
Just remarkable.
So it is a big market.
And every practice has them to start with. Even though you start with younger people, you stay in practice 10 years, these younger people are no longer younger.
Right.
As you know.
Yes. So
the living example.
I'm a living example. So the practice ages with you. So let's see. So here's a great example of multifocal patients, right?
Oh boy.
So you have the two of us here, right? Me on the left and Paul on the right. We are both multifocal wearers, or
Correct.
Could be, right? So I was an emerging presbyope, and now I'm fully fledged. And Paul has been presbyopic since.
But you've always been a contact lens wearer. So
correct.
It's easier for you.
Yep. But I think the point of this slide, is really that, presbyopes look very different, right? It's not all one group. In the old days, you might have had the stereotypical thinking of a presbyopic person was, the old blue-haired or whatever, with
right. But no more
flat tops. But no more. It's very different now. So presbyopes these days want the convenience and visual freedom the contact lenses can offer. So again, with the data that Alcon's provided us, based on their surveys, we know that presbyopes are leading more active lives these days. They have advanced careers and the disposable income to take care of this issue. And many embrace technology, right? Everybody is glued to their phones. It doesn't matter how old you are, right? So it's not just a matter of, some people just read for a little bit of the day and then they just need their distance vision. No, everyone is constantly intermediate all the time, right? You're constantly picking it up and putting it down, and it's constantly changing. And what we also know is boomers are image conscious, right? Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. And not only women. The examples here are 3 women and 1 man. The contact lenses are so trouble-free now that people don't gripe about it. In the early years, people always were complaining about their lenses.
Right.
But even the complaints build practices.
Right.
So you can imagine when people are happy, how it can become a great practice builder.
Right. And so here are some awesome stats that they provided us as well. So nearly half of adults would avoid wearing reading glasses if they knew that they made them look older. 56% of surveyed presbyopes agreed that multifocal contact lenses would make them feel more confident. And 46% of surveyed presbyopes agreed that multifocal contact lenses would make them feel more youthful.
Okay. And that's this confidence not only is in everyday living, but at jobs. People, once you hit 50, there's always that fear you're going to get sacked because of age.
50, how about 40? I mean, as I started to become presbyopic, especially working in the tech field, right, it became a real issue. I didn't want to wear multifocal specs.
Right.
I just didn't. I wanted to stay in my
vanity
lenses.
And the way you dress, by the way, you're not that vain. But when it comes to your glasses,
yeah, I mean, I would wanted to do anything to stay in my lenses, and thank God I live in an era where that's possible now. So putting patients first, the power of one. So what does that mean, right? So the power of one strategy, Alcon basically provides patients and practices with a contact lens portfolio that sort of focuses on the unique materials in 1 day and 1 month replacement schedules. That's the power of one.
Right.
That's where that comes from, in case anyone was wondering. And so this helps promote compliance and more frequent eye exams and practice growth. And if we pull up a little chart here, again, based on Alcon's research, where they look at the compliance of these contact lens wearers, 2 week, the compliance was only 34%. 1 month compliance was 67%, and the dailies, of course, was the king of compliance at 87%.
And so people that wear them and take them and throw them away every day are far more compliant than the 2 week people who keep forgetting.
Yep. And so what this also means is that the lens wearers who are more compliant also come back to the eye care provider more frequently, 3 months sooner than non-compliant lens wearers, according to their data. So then there's this power of one 2.0, putting patients first and driving practice success. And when I looked at this first, I'm like, I don't know what this means. But as I started, studying it a little more, basically you can think of the power of one 2.0 as harnessing big data. So Alcon has this huge data set, right? They have basically, you're feeding them data based on the sales, and they know what patients are doing, they know patient behavior, and they know doctor behavior. And they're able to use this data, and you can see here it's across 80 million data points, across 500 locations and 2.6 million patients. They can try to figure out behavior patterns of patients and doctors to really help you. It's not just a contact lens strategy, but it can also help you grow your practice, right, with this data. So it's kind of cool stuff to try to really help you impact your per patient revenue and the growth in your practice. So if you look at this, and the studies that they did, if you have a patient who just wears glasses, you can expect $472 in annual per patient revenue. If you have a patient with glasses and contact lenses, that bumps up to $1,052.
Remarkable.
So it's a big jump, and that's for sphere toric or multifocal. So 123% increase versus glasses only wearers, and an increase in per patient revenue, even excluding contact lens sales and fitting fees, right? So you're seeing an overall increase as well. Cut it a little bit finer. How about glasses and multifocal contact lenses?
Even more so.
Across all modalities, right? So you can see that the annual per patient revenue is higher. I can go back here to look at the numbers again, 1052, and now it's at 1292. So that's higher. And if you want to bump it up one step further, you can go to the glasses and daily disposable multifocal contact lenses for $1,815 annual per patient revenue. And again, if we look at the increases, what this represents, very large increases over baseline. So the point is, I guess, that these lenses can really help you grow your per patient revenue.
Correct.
Right?
Absolutely.
So for everyone on ODwire who's constantly complaining, I'm seeing so many patients, but I'm not getting anywhere, right?
Yep, that's correct.
This might be a signal.
Sure.
Right? That there are things that you can do to actually boost that per patient revenue.
And the thing is that it sounds like a lot of money every year, that 1815. But you start asking the ladies, what's their hairdresser costs per year, and what do their nails cost per year? And you're going to see some major numbers. So the 1815 is not that outlandish.
Sure. And I mean, I'm, as everyone knows, I wear the DT1 multifocal, and I was thinking about the cost of it. And then I was thinking about, well, I actually do go, a couple times a week, and I get myself one of those big coffee that's not quite, like a milkshake kind of thing at Starbucks. And when you measure the cost of that versus the contact lens, it's about the same.
Well, and they're daily expenses. I mean, it's cold here.
Right.
It's getting cold. And I'm lazy, as usual, and I'm very unhandy, but I know how to light a fire.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get logs now.
Yes.
All you need is a match, and you can have a blazing fire for 4 hours. And it's a beautiful blazing fire, and that single log costs about $4. Now, would I give up that log for $4 a day? The answer is no.
No, you wouldn't.
So the contact lenses are not that expensive when you look at it in the big scheme of things.
Well, in your practice, and you ran one of the largest specialty contact lens practices in New York. What did you see when patients in the world? Excuse me, in the world. Pardon me, big shot. What did you see in terms of patient behavior? Could you easily assess whether a lens would be worth it to someone or not, or were you constantly surprised?
Well, no, I wasn't surprised at all, not one bit, because again, our market was such that people did do their nails each week,
right?
And they did go to the hairdresser each week, and we did have an upper end type of practice, but it was no surprise at all,
right?
What they were willing to spend.
Yep. And I'm kind of curious, as we're going on here and talking, if anyone who has a practice that's sort of in the middle of the bell curve, I'd really be curious to hear about patient behavior.
Again, I wonder how much it depends on not the patient behavior, but the doctor behavior.
Sure.
They're just prejudging what's valuable to patients.
Sure.
You can't prejudge.
And on a side note, I was made fun of actually a couple days ago because of my phone, which I'm a Luddite when it comes to phones because I break them because I constantly I abuse them. But what I do though is I never buy the top of the line phone. I always buy cheap ones. And because I know that I'm going to break it, and these are mobile things and they break. And it's funny because a young person the other day was like making fun of me. They were like, "When was that from? Was that from like 2007?" I'm like, "No, this is a modern phone."
Right.
But there are just things that people value differently, and
sure.
and you never know. You never know what it's going to be. They assume because I'm in tech that I would always have the fanciest, but that's not the case at all. Okay, so moving on. So the Alcon Multifocal 3-2-1 Advantage. So this is something that I was trying to teach Paul.
Yes, great marketing.
Because it's easy to understand.
He started today with a cynic, and he has to, after an hour, make me a believer.
Right, that's true. So, the what's really going on here, Paul and I always used to argue about the merits of multifocal lenses, because back in his day, there weren't that many available when he started.
Oh boy.
And the ones that were didn't work very well. So I've had to sort of show him the ropes and what's been going on in the latest technology. Of course, the fact that I wear them, it helps. But anyway, so the 3-2-1 Advantage. So 3 lenses for any lifestyle. You can see the 3 up on your screen: Dailies Total 1, Dailies Aqua Comfort Plus, and Air Optics. So 3 with 2 replacement schedules, right? So we mentioned that before. There's dailies and a monthly.
Right. Period.
Right. Period. The end. And 1 innovative optical design. So basically, all 3 lenses have the same design.
So you can fit any 3 of them.
Yes.
The same way.
Exactly. So you don't have to mess around. So 3, 2, 1. Very easy to remember. But even easier to remember is if you're clever and you talk to the folks at Alcon, they can send you this thing called a toolkit. And I actually got one. I went down to Fort Worth and they gave me one. But this is something that everyone can take advantage of. So ask your Alcon rep when you see them about the toolkit. So it's got a bunch of stuff inside. I actually took a couple of pictures of the toolkit. Here it is. This is one sitting on my desk right now, where it's resources that you can share with your patients and that you can also use to help you fit the lenses properly. So as you can see on the screen, there's talking points. There's an intake pad. Patient expectations sheet, and so forth. So you can take a good look at that. And of course, the most important thing that's there is the multifocal fitting guide. And we'll get to that in a second.
And then so again, type of lens where the near is in the center.
Correct.
And the intermediate and outward goes from intermediate to distance vision.
Correct. You can see actually a picture of it right there on the screen. So there you go.
Right.
And so here's what the inside of the toolkit looks like, but it's definitely a really useful thing. And if you don't have one, you should definitely try to get one. If you're going to be working a lot with multifocals, very handy to have. And I mentioned too in the toolkit, something that is absolutely critical, and we stressed over and over again at these shows, the fit guide. You've got to follow it.
Trust Alcon that they've done the research.
It's critical. They've done the research. They know what works and what doesn't. So please, please, please follow the fitting guide. And again, you can sort of see it on the screen right here. And so if you follow the fit guide, you can expect to get 80% fit success with one lens per eye, and you can expect to get 96% fit success with two lenses or less per eye.
Right.
So at ODwire, we are constantly up against, some people who say, "Oh, I can't do multifocals because it takes too much time."
Right.
Now, in the olden days, back in your day, I could believe that.
It took time.
You
charged accordingly.
Yep. But it was a lot of chair time. But these days, I think with the newer designs and with the fitting guides, I think the process has become refined enough that it's becoming faster.
Right.
But it's just a matter of actually following the fitting guide. And more than 9 out of 10 ECPs agree that Dailies Total 1 multifocal contacts are easy and efficient to fit as well.
Yeah, and they work.
And they work, which is the most important thing. So, yeah. The other thing that Alcon's been doing, just to give you a sense, is that they've been reaching out to consumers, and you can see that they've been doing direct-to-consumer advertising, which is something that I think is really important too, because it's helpful. You're only a doctor in your office, right? And it's very useful, obviously, for you to talk to patients, but it's nice if they get reinforcement outside as well.
Sure.
So Alcon created a site called nearandfar.com, and I can actually see if I can flip over to this. Let's see if it blows up the webinar. Knowing my luck, it will. Let's see. Oh, there we go. So hopefully all you guys can still see that. I will make sure you can. Okay, perfect. And so this is the site. And you can see this is patient facing. So patients will be able to find this on the World Wide Web to learn more about multifocals, or you could actually send them there as well if you want to give them more information. Again, it's all about multifocals, talks about actually the design of the Alcon lenses.
These are the people from the TV commercial.
Right, and so there are TV commercials as well. And if you haven't seen it, this is the commercial of the emerging presbyopes, I guess, in the restaurant with the giant menus. One other thing that there's also on the site is the Find an Eye Doctor page. And if you click on it, you'll see it'll give you a map. And the patient can just type in a search location, and it can bring up.
Oh, it's Lower Manhattan there.
So see if I can bring up a place that I know, like Roslyn, New York, and we'll see if
there it is.
So there's your old practice right there.
Oh, and
you're right there. Yeah. So it can help patients find docs who will fit these multifocals. So you might want to go to this website and see if you're listed there, and if not, you may want to reach out to Alcon so they can actually give you the steps about how to get placed on the site as well. Yeah, let me get back to the presentation here. So I think it's going to really take a combination of trying to, have the sort of consumer-facing stuff, but also in your practice, you have to try to talk to patients when they come in.
You have to be a believer.
Sure.
It's not bad if you have a couple of presbyopic staff to have them in the product.
Right. Yep. And I'm just clicking around here to see questions that people are starting to ask. And I guess the big question that I would have, for you, let's say that, you are going to start fitting these things. What do you do about your patients? Now, traditionally, I know in the past, you might have someone in a monovision, right? That's how you used to handle this.
The way it went,
right,
in the olden days is within 10 years of practice, our younger patients that we started when they were in their 30s were in their 40s and they started complaining. And we didn't have many choices. We're talking about the 1960s, early 70s. And the easy way was to continue wearing the same contact lenses they have, but put them into monovision. And amazing that monovision did work. It was a compromise, but many types of contact lenses in those days were a compromise. And then believe it or not, there was a rigid gas permeable lens that came out that was a flat top bifocal.
Huh.
And that did work. It really did work, except it was so thick and so uncomfortable that people just discarded them. It just didn't work.
Right.
And then came the multifocals.
Right. So if you have patients, who are in monovision right now, what would you do to try to move them?
I would let them know that there's a downside to monovision, is that they're not seeing out of both eyes simultaneously.
Right.
And I would ask them, how are you doing when you're driving at night? And the answer will be not well.
Terrible, yeah.
And I'd say, well, why don't we try these? What have you got to lose? And many patients would be willing to lose a consultation fee to try these. You don't have to give your services away to try these, because there's a better than 50-50. Probably it's more like 80% chance that the patients will be delighted.
Right.
And then it's just a question of proper marketing in your practice to let them, give them a feeling of what's valuable to you. Is your eyesight valuable?
Right.
So I mean, it's like people wearing hearing aids. I fought hearing aids like crazy, but once I had them, I wouldn't do without them.
Okay, cool. So questions are coming in right now, questions and comments. So because of course,
can we answer the questions?
This is always the challenge. Well, questions about modalities and when to fit a patient in each kind. Now, again, I know that you're not as familiar with these different materials, right? We saw the 3 different products that they have here with the Daily Total One and the Air Optics, and the Dailies Aqua Comfort Plus. But I guess the question is, what would you do?
Well, wasn't there a movie, Moonstruck, where a guy was trying to sell brass?
Now you're showing your age.
He's selling copper plumbing, and he said, "You don't want anything else other than copper for the plumbing." And he was a good salesman. And again, it's a question of proper marketing in your practice to let them have the perceived value of what is it worth to you.
Right. I mean, what would you say to a doctor who, and again, I saw this just on ODwire, I guess it was a week ago or so, where people are just saying, ugh, this is just too much trouble. It's more trouble than it's worth.
What?
Multifocals. I've seen people actually say that I just don't want to get involved. I have a patient who's type A, they drive me crazy. And I know that if I even, start talking to people, I don't want to get involved with this. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
Well, no, it's worth keeping your patient, because there'll be somebody down the road that will say, no, this is worth something. And if you don't do what's available to the patient, and they want multifocals, and you cannot again check their ego or their pocketbook why they want it. There's a chance you'll lose a patient, and nobody wants to do that. On the other hand, if you're first in the neighborhood to do these become an enormous practice builder. Be first. And people often ask, how do we develop the most successful one of the most successful practices in the country in the most tough market? Because we always were first with materials and techniques, and patients came to and used our services because of that. So be first in your area. If there aren't people using this modality, be first.
Good advice. And so a comment here for someone saying, if it's taking them that long, they're not following the fitting guide properly. So, yeah. So that's because for most people, I mean, that's the biggest objection that I've seen. That was always the big objection in cost. And again, they're counting their patients' money. They're saying, oh, these are too expensive. And again, how long it takes. So what's your time worth per hour? And if you convert the charges into what your time is worth per hour, it shouldn't take that long, because you're getting compensated. That's the key. You get that perceived value and make certain patients, but it does require some professional time, and get paid for it. Right. Yep. So question here, parameters. I mean, we're not experts, but we can talk a little bit about the parameters, I guess, for these particular lenses. We know so that comes in, what was it, -10 to +6 in quarter diopter steps. And one curvature, I assume. Yep. Yeah, so it's easy. Not like the old days.
What are you going to do?
Right. Excellent. So let me see what else question-wise here. Question, do you ever give the patient a choice of which lens to wear in terms of when you're picking the different brands and let them go home with different ones to try them out?
Well, I'm not in practice anymore, but I wouldn't. I'm the boss, and I said, this is what's going to work for you. Don't try out things. We don't want a trial, because then you're going to be juggling lenses, and that's when it becomes time consuming.
I see. So your strategy was always
you're
just
dealing with this Alcon product is the best of something, and that's what your patients deserve. So no choices.
Interesting question here. We had one actually that we addressed, and again, this is a clinical question. Probably you're not the best person to ask about this, about the particular lens design, where people are finding they have to push more plus with this lens. With the DT1 than they normally would for patients, and I guess I'm assuming that has to
people that are fitting it.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm assuming that has something to do with the design of the lens, but that is actually an accurate observation, at least for me.
You're wearing more plus than you should have.
Yep.
So you're sacrificing a little bit of distance.
Just the slightest amount. In fact, we were surprised by how much plus we could add.
I'm sitting here next to you, and the print here is so small I can barely see it with these glasses.
Sorry.
So it does work.
Yes, it definitely works. There's no question about that. One other question we had too about handling, and again, I know this wasn't supposed to be a clinical webinar, but it is kind of interesting. With the Dailies Total 1, when you remove the lenses, the critical thing when you're doing INR with these lenses, remind the patients their hands have to be absolutely bone dry. Their lenses have to be bone dry because your hands have to be bone dry, or else the lens will not come out.
Yeah.
And I've experienced this personally, so. It just has to do with the new material and how slick it is. Cool. All right. And so let me actually see what other questions we have going on here. And I'm trying to run some down here that would be generally useful. And
you can run some, you can see these questions immediately, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So if you have a question coming up, we do have people from Alcon standing by the way.
That's true.
So if we can't answer any marketing questions or even fitting questions, just put them up.
Question that I absolutely can't answer, but the people at Alcon might be able to, is where did this data come from for the Power of One 2.0? The different data points that they're mentioning here, where did they actually generate that from, and how did they get it? So I'm not sure if the Alcon folks can share that with me, how they actually came up with all this data to support all of this. So, yep. And yes, and a good insight, as someone just mentioned here, in terms of pushing plus, the thing to do is actually look to the fitting guide, which I never even thought about because I'm just as bad as everyone else. But look to the fitting guide because it talks about that, about pushing the plus on these lenses. So So again, they thought of things that we haven't. And let's see. So we just got a few more minutes here. I just want to take a quick look here to see if anybody has any more economic questions, because clinical stuff is interesting, but I know that we really do want to talk about sort of the practice building aspect of it. I mean, did you have any other tips for folks? You know, you practiced in a time where really getting the new thing was the most important thing to building your practice.
Right.
So,
and once you have it, I wouldn't keep it a secret. I mean, actually, all your patients are, you have your computers now that you know who's becoming pre-presbyopes.
Very true.
Presbyopic. You know exactly who's in monovision, and you want to come up with a fair consultation fee to let the monovision people try it for a week or two, and let them determine whether it's worth it for them to get binocular vision again.
Right. And so would you, I guess, you know, these days it's so much easier now. There are all those systems that people have in place where they can push these emails out, you know, based on the demographics of their patients. You know, take the person who's 40 years old and just push something very targeted at them saying, hey, you know, bet your arms are getting a little bit too short. Maybe you want to come in and we have this technology and I can help you.
Sure. Absolutely, and also maybe I'm switching over a little bit to ODwire, but we had a discussion about how do you build a practice using marketing tools and having the media come to your office, or not even necessarily come to your office, but learn about the fact that there are multifocals that work, that people can wear comfortably, not even know it's in their eye for a full day, and it's not a problem. And there may be a market in your town. Maybe if you're in a big city, it's not of great interest to the media, but in a small town where they're desperate for newsworthy stuff,
right?
They'll talk about you and your practice and this new product. So it's a tremendous way to build a practice.
Absolutely. And thank you, Jennifer from Alcon. So we have the question answered about where that data came from. So that was practice level data at 500 locations, which is, I'm sure, a pretty representative sample.
Right. City, urban, rural.
Right. So awesome. And we have a note here about a doctor who actually he bundles multifocals. You can sell them with sunglasses, and I'd love him to expand on that too,
right,
as a bundle. So I think that's kind of an interesting take as well.
Sure, absolutely.
So a different approach. Okay, well, I think we've hit just about 40 minutes. So if there are no other sort of questions, what we'll do is we'll put this up on ODwire. This archive hopefully will make it up, and we can talk a little. We brought up a lot of different things, whether it's about marketing or just the revenue increases or the practice building techniques. And I think we should continue talking about it.
Sure.
As we do,
so
and maybe
it'll be up by tomorrow.
Centralize it around this thread. I'm not sure when it's going to be up, but it'll be there eventually, and we can go from there. And we're going to have one final webinar as well coming up. And everybody who's here, you're going to get an email about it too. There's a series of 3 webinars on multifocal fittings.
And it won't be us.
And it won't be us. Thank goodness for you guys, right? We're going to have another expert, on fitting. So and so it should be an interesting one. To sort of close it out. And then again, we're going to put all 3 series together on one page on the site so we can, sort of centralize the discussion around it.
And make use of Alcon, by the way. We have questions. They have sales reps that are dying to hear from you. So if you have any specific questions that we can't answer and you want to, when you need inventory or that type of thing, to check with the sales reps.
Yep, I'm going to give a little plug to Alcon here, right? So this is the new Alcon, right? So this is what everyone's been talking about on the site, how Alcon has become an independent company.
They're independent, yeah.
And so, I think everybody has sort of noticed over the past year, it sort of felt, we like to say the new Alcon, at least to us, feels a lot like the old Alcon from yesteryear, from the days that you remember.
Nice, but they love us.
But just in terms of the responsiveness, so Paul was right. I mean, if you have questions, they are really responsive to answer them. They'll be right on top of it. So feel free. They're always there to help. So again, thanks everyone for coming out tonight. And that's it for Multifocals.